Hey everybody, this is Jennifer Mason. Thank you for joining us on today's webcast. This is a third in our series of just some out-of-the-box simple things you can do with SharePoint. In today's session, we are going to be talking about some more advanced features with workflows and some of the things you can do in terms of assigning tasks and using content types to manage those tasks. So to get started, we're going to hop through an example site that we have here. So this is an employee suggestion site. The idea is that employees can come up, and as they have new ideas, they're going to add them to the site. Then it's going to go through an approval process, or specifically has where, HR is going to approve it, then the departments are going to approve it, and then it's going to get funded. So we have a three-step approval process here, and through each one of those different approvals, we want to be able to collect different sets of information and get information from the people who are completing the task. So we have got the site here. We're using the promoted links to navigate to it, and if I click add a new suggestion, it's simply going to take me through and let me add a new suggestion. So I'm going to just put in some information here, and then I'm going to take you through and show you what happens. So I'm going to hit save here, and it is going to add it to the employee suggestion list, and you see other ones that are already here. I see what department they're associated with. I see a suggestion status, and if I was to click over here and see workflows, I would see that a suggestion approval workflow has started. And what this workflow is going to do is it's going to go out to different groups and assign them tasks based on the values that are there. So I'm going to go back and actually hop into the workflow task list, and I can show you guys some of the tasks that are already there for some of our existing workflows that are going on. So I'm going to hop over here into workflow tasks, and I have all of my tasks here that aren't completed. And you see I've got different content types. So I have an approval task from HR, a department approval task, and then I even have a funding approval task. And if I go into any one of these and edit it, you're going to see the different properties that I have associated with this particular item. So is it approved and funded? Is it approved and not funded? What is the funding cost code? So this is a piece of information that somebody in funding would need to provide, but somebody in HR wouldn't have any say-so, and it doesn't really matter to them. And so that's the funding one. But if I come over here to the HR approval one, we're going to come down here and I just see HR approval comments. So what does HR want to say about it? If I come back and now look at this and I go into the department one, I see that I have got details that are specific to the department. What are their approval comments, and do they give it a low, medium, or high? And so what we see here is that we have three different tasks that are getting assigned in the workflow, and we're able to control what these buttons say. And so if we just did one out of the box, it would say, approved, rejected, cancel, save, different things like that. But we want to be able to go in and give them meaningful buttons and have them do meaningful things throughout the workflow. So the secret to doing this in SharePoint 2013 is going to be through the use of content types that are going to be based off of the workflow task content type. So switch tabs over here. I'm in that same site, and I just went into Site Settings, Content Types, and I can see all of the different content types I have. If I come down here to my group Custom Employee Suggestions, we'll see that I have got that Department Approval Task, I've got the Funding Approval Task, and the HR Approval Task. So we see here that we've got three different content types that are based off of the Workflow Task content type. So this is going to be one of the out-of-the-box content types that exist, and the idea is that when we have a custom task that we want to complete during a workflow, that before we go build the workflow, we're going to come into our content types and we're going to build out that custom task. So I'm going to come over here. Let's say I wanted to add a fourth level of approval, or I wanted to get a different piece. We could come over here and say create. And then I could come down here and I could find, look through, find the different pieces. Whatever I click here, it's going to show these up over here. So it's community content types, document content types, folders. This one is actually, let's see, list content type. So it's a workflow task under the list content types. And so I'm going to come over here. I'm going to call this one live demo so that we know it's the task that we're showing in the live demo. And I'm going to make it's a list content type, it's workflow task. And by inheriting from the workflow task, it's going to give me all of the fields and all of the properties that I need. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to add it to this custom employee suggestions just to kind of group everything together. It really could go anywhere. So I'm going to add this here and I'm going to say OK. And this is just the step that we need to do before we go to build our workflow that makes this task available. And so if we come and look at this, we see that we've got the task name, start date, due date, a lot of these common task things that are there with this additional task outcome. So I have these different pieces here. If I click on task outcome, you're going to see, if I go edit the site column, I'm going to see that it's got the approved and rejected, the standard pieces that are there. But maybe that's not what I want to do. Maybe I want to have my own workflow status content. Like I want to have my own status, my own outcome choices that are different than anything that's already there. And so just by adding new site columns, I'm going to be able to do this. And so one thing that we can also do is we can hide the columns that we don't need to have displayed. So if I don't want to have, maybe a body, or I don't want to have predecessors, priority, maybe these things aren't relevant to the task I want to do, I can hide those. And so I have a couple of different options while I'm here. Inside of here, I can actually click on them if I don't need predecessor, and I can remove it. What I like to do instead is to make them hidden. So if it's a field that I'm not going to use, I like to keep everything as it is out of the box and just hide the fields that I don't need and then add my new fields that I do need. This is especially important to remember with this because %complete and task status must remain visible in order for the form to generate correctly where you get the buttons along the bottom. So I'm going to just, instead of deleting what's there, I'm going to simply hide the ones that aren't relevant to what I need and then add in the additional fields that matter the most to me. So I'm going to just hide in those different ones, leave the rest of them there. But maybe I want to add some new pieces, especially that task outcome. So I want to come over here and let's get a task outcome. Let's see, it's probably under workflow. Oh, let me see. I wanted to create a new one. Sorry about that. So I'm going to come over here and I'm not going to add from existing. I'm going to add from a new site column and I am going to make it a task outcome. Okay. Custom task outcome. All right, so I'm going to come down here and I'm going to pick what I want my choices to be. So I have my different outcome options that are here. I love it, not so much, let's think about it some more. And whatever these values are, this is what's going to allow me to take it to that next level inside of my workflow. So if someone says they love it, what's going to happen next in my workflow? Different things with that. To simplify it, I'm going to just do the two, I love it, and not so much. Okay, so we have these two here, and I'm going to say okay. And so everything that we've done up at this point is just getting that task ready for our workflow. So we know that we have got different tasks that are going to have to go through our workflow, and we want to plan them out and then go and build all of our content types. And so if I've got 3 different people that need to get a task, I can come build these 3 different tasks there. I may have 3 different people that need to get the same task, and so I may be able to build just one content type. The idea, though, in 2013 is that before I go into Sharepoint Designer and actually build out the workflow, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to build out my content types. So I have a question up in the question box, so let me me go ahead and answer that. He's asking if we're going to see any examples for REST web services or OData web services within the workflow actions. And in this demo, I'm not going to be doing anything like that. I'm going to be sticking with more of what you can do just out of the box. So I won't be doing any of those types of examples in this session. So thanks for asking the question. I would love it. So if you guys have additional questions as we're going through things, I'll try to pop over to that box and answer them as we're going through so I can make sure I answer your questions relevant to what we're talking about. So we've created these content types. This is something that's really different in 2013 than it was in 2010. And the reason that I say it's different is because it's changed my behavior when I'm building out a workflow. When I'm going to build out a workflow now inside of 2013, I really do spend a lot of time mapping it out, thinking through what the task might be before I actually go build it inside of Sharepoint Designer, because I need a lot of times to have these different content types. And so that's just a little different behavior than what I portrayed in 2010. And so it's just interesting to see how that changes and how the different ways we can do things change our process for building things out. So now that we've got this content type, we're going to go into SharePoint Designer and start to use it. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time inside of SharePoint Designer showing you some awesome things that I love about the 2013 workflows. And specifically, we're going to come up here to workflows. And I am going to come over here and create a workflow for employee suggestions. And I'm going to call it Jennifer Live Demo. Okay, we're going to make it a SharePoint 2013 workflow, and we're going to say OK. We're going to give it just a minute to create, and I see I've got these different pieces here, but I'm using SharePoint Enterprise, and I have Visio installed, and so I want to come over here to my views, and I'm going to go to the Visual Designer. What this is going to allow me to do is kind of map out what I'm trying to build before I have to do it in the text designer. And so I see here that I've got my initial stage, but one of the wonderful things I love about this is I kind of have a general idea of how I want it to go. So I'm going to actually say generate a stage outline. And what this is going to allow me to do is create the stages and kind of map out everything, put in the logic for when do I go to what stage before I ever have to build anything. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I'll come here and I'll work through this. Once I have this, I identify what content types I need. I can go back to the site, or I can do it in SharePoint Designer, create my content types. Then I come in and fill in the information. So let's say, HR approval. I know I'm going to have a task for HR to approve it. Once that's done, I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to have a piece of logic where I'm going to say, if HR approves it, then we're going to come over here to custom approval. And the custom approval, we're going to just point to my task that's there. Okay. Once the custom, once it goes through that piece, we're going to say, yeah, we are, we're going to put this other logic piece in here, and then we're going to say, yeah, that's awesome, send, email approval. And maybe in this email approval state, we're going to say to somebody, hey, everything's been approved, we're good to go, we're going to send an email. But we might also have a not approved, so that if it gets rejected, we have a place for it to go. So I'm building out all of these different stages that are there, and then I'm going to connect them together. So I'm going to take my connector tool, just like I would inside of Visio. I'm going to grab these. Okay. And then I'm going to add different pieces of information. So if it's approved here, I'm going to say yes. And if it's not approved, it's going to go to the not approved stage. It's going to go through the custom approval. And then if it gets approved here, make sure I got the right one, I'm going to say yes, go to email approval. And if no, go to the not approved stage. So I have these different stages of what the workflow can go to. And I'm saying, HR approves it. So we have an HR approval task here. Okay, if it equals yes, it's approved, go to custom approval. If it's a no, go ahead and say it's not approved. If it gets through custom approval, then when we're over here, we can say email the final approval, or we can say not approved. This allows us to have one action for not approved, but we have different paths to get there. And so this is a great visual way to design it all out. And what's really awesome about this, if I come now back over here and I say generate workflow outline, oops, I missed it. I have an issue in this one, so let me get this one fixed. Okay, let me see. Where did I probably have a connector that is not connected correctly. So let me come up here. Sometimes you run into a few issues when you're connecting the different sites if you're not careful how you connect them. And if you run into those issues, you typically just have to get that one fixed and it should be fine. So this is going to be a no. There we go. It also does not like typos. So I had a not where I needed to have a no. So you can see it's still a little sensitive on that, but easy enough to fix if you find it. And so now it's going to put all of the pieces here for me and build out all of these stages. And now I can go in and add just the specific steps. But what's really awesome about this, if I go back to views now and go to that text-based designer, it's doing all of that logic for me. If it equals, I can go in and I can fill them in, but go to custom approval, otherwise go to not approved. And so it's building all of these pieces for me. It's putting in the labels for me, and it's going to allow me to go in there and quickly fill in the data of what's there. So it just becomes extremely helpful when doing it. And so now what I could do is I could go and say, okay, we've got HR approval. So the action that I want to take is I want to come down here and I want to start a task process. So I'm going to click and do that. I'm going to pick with these users. So when I click on that, it's going to let me customize the outcome. And so here's where I could go in and pick different people. I have a group actually for HR approvers, so I'm going to go say, yep, for my SharePoint group HR approvers, we want to assign this task. I can give it a task title. So, new request needs approval. And just like I could in previous versions of SharePoint, I can hit the ellipse and I can add lookups and different things like that based on the current item that's there. So I have that there. I can put in a description here. Okay, I can give it a due date. I'm going to show you a trick about the due date in just a second. I could give it task options. Do I want to wait for one to complete, assign a task to each member? How do we want to do that? Wait for first response, and that's fine with what we're doing here. Email options. Do I want to send an overdue task email if they're not completing it on time? And when we come down here to outcome options, we want to pick what tasks do we want to do. So where we showed earlier where we're creating that new task, we also have our other ones here. So I could say, let's go to an HR approval task. It's going to say, be sure that your content type is associated with your task list. And so what we want to do for that is if we create new content types, we need to put them in the workflow task list where we have them so that they're going to work correctly. But we could say, then our HR approval outcome, that status outcome field, and then we have the default outcome, what's going to happen if we have any errors. So we're going to say OK here, and it's going to put that there. It's going to put this variable in outcome, right? So task outcome in a new variable called outcome. So we would want to come over here and say if our workflow variable outcome equals 2, and that's where we would go pick what our values are going to be. So either approved by HR or rejected by HR. Those match the items that we put potential inside of our custom task. Okay, so then if we did the same thing come over here and I could say start a task process. We could come here and now I could pick users. Whoops, let me see, did it let me? I have to come over here to do my lookup. There we go. So I'm in there. That's great. Task title, custom approval task. Okay. And then we can come over here again and we can say, you know, how are we going to do this? What email options do we have? Do we want different emails to come up? If I say open the email editor, I see that I have information here. They do a lot to populate this for me so that I don't have to write it. Excuse me. It also gives it in a nice viewable format. So this is a huge improvement from previous versions of SharePoint. In my opinion, it just makes life a lot easier, a lot happier. And come over here to outcomes. I'm going to say we want my live demo task. Got a custom task outcome. I love it. That's so fine. So we can come over there and we can say outcome 1 because this is what they made it. Now I could always come up here and say, ooh, I don't want it to be outcome 1. That doesn't mean anything to me. So I could come over here and say make it custom approval outcome. Leave the same type, but I could do it that way. Then if I came over here and did a lookup, I can look up against something that makes more sense to me. So I'm going to go workflow variables and parameters, custom approval outcome. If it equals to I love it, go to email approval, else go to not approved. So we've got different pieces there that allow us to do that. Something that I also wanted to show when we were doing this is due dates. And so I may want to have this second level of approval. I may want it to be due 7 days after it gets assigned to me. Well, how can I pull that? Because the workflow is going to kick off. I don't want it 7 days from the workflow. I want it 7 days from the time it makes it to that step. And so something I can do in the beginning of this is I can add time. And if I say add time to a date, I could say, you know, add 7 days, and I can put in a date here and put the outcome into a variable. So I can say add 7 days to the current date and put it in the outcome variable date. But I may not want to say date because it doesn't, you know, really mean anything to me. I may want to say due date. So I come over here, add 7 days to due date. Now when I'm in here and I go to complete my task, when I go to due date, I can come over here, I can pick on the FX, then I can go into workflow variables and I can pick my due date. Okay, so then that's going to dynamically set that to 7 days after it's making it into this stage. So that's a good way to keep the due date fluctuating based on the time of when it enters that stage of the workflow. I don't know if you guys noticed when we were doing this, if we come over here and click on local variables, we have a lot of different variables that are here, especially outcome 1 and date. Those are ones that were manually or automatically created for us, but then we manually went and overrode them with something more meaningful. One thing you can do to clean up your workflows is to come over here and remove those and clean those up when you're going through the process so that you don't end up with too many variables in there that don't make a lot of sense and that are hard to keep up with as you're going through different things and things named all over the place. So it's much easier to go in every once in a while, go into your local variables, and if you're not using it, go ahead and clean that up to keep it clean and easy to use. So we might come down here with email. If it's been approved, we'll come over here. We might want to email whoever created it. So we're going to come over here and workflow lookup for a user, and we're going to say created by. Okay. And again, we can click over here. We can add a lookup. So we can go to current item, maybe pick title. And there we go. And then we see that things are there. We may want to go ahead and change its color, maybe make it a little bit bigger, maybe italics, you know, different things that we can do to style it depending on what what fills our needs, what meets our requirements. So we're going to come over here and say okay here with that. Once we do that, we're going to go to the end of the workflow because everything's done. We may come over here and say email again, and we probably just want to email the same person who created it. So we could go workflow lookup for our user again. We can do created by. And again, we can put these lookups wherever it makes sense. So before I had put the title, then a colon, and put what it was, but we could actually put these in line. So we could say, you know, okay. Okay, so different things here. We can put in these pieces of information. So we're going to say okay here now, and then like we said, if it does not equal to love it, then we're going to go to that not approved stage. And then from there, it's going to go to the end of the workflow. So we've built out this workflow here. I'm going to go ahead and hit publish. And while we're waiting for that, if there's any questions, go ahead and add them to the question box, and I'd be happy to answer them, as then we're going to go switch into the other view and kick off one of these workflows and show you the different pieces. Okay, I don't see any questions, and it told me that it has been published. So there's a couple of things that we want to do. We first want to go look at our workflow settings, and we see that this one is set to allow it to be manually started. We could also say start it when an item is created. So if we wanted to change that, come over here and change that there. And then we also need to go to our workflow task list, and so we can see which task list that is from this front page here about the workflow. So I see my task list is called workflow tasks, and we need to make sure in the workflow task list that all of our content types from our custom tasks are there. And if they're not there, then when it tries to generate that new task, it's not going to be able to put that inside of that type of task list. So we're going to just click on workflow tasks here. We're going to go to list, and we're going to go to list settings, and we're going to see all of the different content types that are here. And here we would see that we have these different items here, and we're going to add from existing. Got our custom employee suggestions, and we're going to add our live demo task. Okay. Okay, now we have the live demo task. I can click on it and validate that this is the right one, custom task outcome. This is the one that we just created here. So if I click on that and edit the column, we'll see that we're going to have the love it or not so much. Okay. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions in the box. It says, can we update list with task outcome or comments from the workflow? And the answer to that is yes, just like you could inside of previous versions. So if we actually come back over here to our employee suggestion list, we see here that suggestion status is approved and funded, new, waiting for approval, approved by associated department. This is actually what's getting set from the workflow statuses. So in the workflow that's running on this one, it is updating the suggestion status based on the outcomes that are there. So that's definitely something that we can do. Also, as we name our stages, we can see when it's going through the workflow, the name of the stage is what's going to show up in that column. So there's different ways that we could do that there. Okay. Let me close Twitter here. The other question I have is, how would you go about creating a reminder email 7 days before the due date? So I would create a workflow for an item. So when a new item gets added, you go in and you would add date to a time, and you would add -7 to the due date. Then you would pause until that date and then send a reminder email. You would have to put some logic in there, though, to make sure that if it was due in less than 7 days, that you just immediately sent it. But that would be one way that you could do that. Okay, so we've got our items here now, and if I go, I could come down, I could go to workflows, and I see that I've got my live demo workflow that I could kick it off. So if I go ahead and hit, yep, let's go ahead, let's show off this workflow here. We'll give it just a second and let that workflow kick off. We're going to see for my live demo that we're in the HR approval stage. And so what that means is I'm over here in this HR approval stage. And so I should have this task that's been assigned to the HR approvals. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And I see that there's a request here. So if I come over here and I'm going to edit this item, I'm going to see that I have HR approval comments. And I'm going to say that it's approved by HR. Okay, so now I am going to go back to the employee suggestions list. And for that same one we're doing, give it just a second, and it's going to go to that next phase there. Now it's in the custom approval phase. So we see that it's going through, and it's now into that next piece. So if I come over here to custom approval, and I click on it, I say edit item, we are going to see, oops, I clicked on the wrong one. There we go. We are going to see our items, and we're going to see love it, not so much. Okay, so we have our different pieces that are there. And so those are ways that we can customize those buttons that are there and show those different pieces. And so I'm getting some other questions, and it says, can a task form show list data? Yes, if you do some different things with lookups, you could build out a field where you're putting that data on there. It can get a little tricky sometimes, but you can populate that data. One way to do it is to put like a link to the associated item so people can click on it and open it and see it. So not totally easy to customize, but you can do it. All right, so we have those different pieces there. If we were to go ahead and finish that one, and I must have not hid my last button because I also have the approve and reject, so I need to go back into my content type and make sure I have that different workflow status button hidden. But if I come over here and say love it, it's going to complete that workflow for me, or complete that task in the workflow for me, and then it's going to take it to that next step. So again, I'm going to come back over here to site contents. And the reason I'm going back into site contents and jumping into the employee suggestions is because I don't necessarily want to keep hitting the back button to go back to that list, because some of this information is cached. And so if I launch into that, I see that now I'm in the email approval stage. And so if I open in a new tab and open up my Outlook, since I'm the same one who created these items, you should see some of the emails that I sent or that I would have gotten along the way for completing the task, or even seeing the new request has been approved. And here are my emails about getting the task. Okay, so we have that there. So I see that, need request needs approval. There's the suggestion that they did. So if I was here, I would be able to click on it and see the information that I need to approve. If I'm here, I can click on it and open that task that I have. So again, I have those different pieces that are there. And so what this enables us to do is kind of build and customize that experience. So again, most of it's doing it through content type, so we know what content types we want to have available. So if we go into site settings and go to our content types, we see the different ones that we had. So yeah, so here I just needed to hide this one, so I just had the one. So make that hidden. and that will fix that for that next one that we do. So then I'm just showing approve and reject for the defaults, and so I didn't have them hidden, so it was actually showing approve and reject as well as my other custom task outcomes. So we wanted to make it so it was just showing the one, so we can come over here. Now it's going to just be showing that one. And so when we're looking at these suggestions, I also have it set up so it was going to set for new ones. So we could say add a new suggestion. Okay. So putting in this information, I can say save, and it's going to go out and it's going to create that new item and then kick off that workflow for me. So we see that here, and we see that it's already been kicked off for us, and it's in the HR approval thing. So we can come over here, and again, I would get an email if I was looking over here that a new task had been assigned to me. So I could see, it might take a couple seconds for it to come over, but that's ultimately what's going to be happening. But I can always click on it manually here, edit the item. Most of the time they're going to get it though through email. They're not going to be doing different things. I can put in these comments. These comments are just now part of this task. So I can take these and then populate them back to the other item. So come over here, put in whatever we want, and maybe we're going to say this time it's rejected to show how it goes to that other phase. So we'll give it just a second to reject. Okay, so the task has now been completed because it's been rejected. I'm going to come over here to Site Contents and go back into Employee Suggestions. And now we are going to see live. Well, we're going to see it in just a second. Give it a second to catch up. These things are always fun to demo because they never happen immediately. So as you guys are waiting to see my screen refresh, come back over here. We see that, all right, let me make sure I got it. Okay. And there we go. We have failed. Oh, I was in there twice somehow. Okay, so we see that we have failed when we're there. So we went to the not approved, which is going to send out the email that says, sorry, your request has been rejected. Please submit any future ideas. So we're able to go ahead and notify the person who created it that says, hey, sorry, this wasn't approved, here you go. And so we build out this workflow, build out this process. We're able to use SharePoint Designer in a visual way to map out all the stages of the workflow. And then we're able to go into each one of these stages and put the data that's there. But by using the visual design, we're kind of able to put in those yes and no features without really having to do a lot of logic and planning. So we're able to plan out what we need for the workflow, then go build our custom content types, and then go back into SharePoint Designer and build out the workflow. Okay, and so there's a couple of questions in there that says, is there a way to suppress the workflow column that SharePoint creates? At times we have multiple workflow users on a list and it confuses the end users. I totally agree with that. So it is going to, by default, whenever you create a new workflow, it's going to add that column to the list. So if I come over here to Site Contents and go to Employee Suggestions, we're going to see that it's added this column here when I created a new workflow. There's no way to not add that column, but the simplest way around it is to go to List and say Modify View, and then just don't display that column for them. So there's no way to keep it from doing there, but it's going to put there. Mark asked if this demo is going to be recorded and posted on a public domain, and the answer to that is yes. We're recording it now, and so hopefully by the end of this week, it should be on our YouTube channel. So you can always find our information on sharepoint.rackspace.com, and when you go to that homepage there's a resources tab. And if you go to that resources tab, you're going to be able to find all of this information here. So you can come here, grab all those pieces. So our previous 2 webcasts were there, and this one will be there as well. And then in a few weeks, we're thinking about doing some other webcasts for no-code solutions. So we will follow up with that as we get closer with some of the others. So hopefully you guys found today's webcast helpful, and we look forward to seeing you guys on future webcasts. Thanks, guys.